So Shabbat Shalom, everyone. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our guest and our speaker tonight, Dr. Morinis. I always try to bring you people whose teaching I love and who I think will each of us learn and grow from, and Morinis is very much in that category. You can see his bio in your Shabbat Shalom handout. He's founder of the Musar Institute, a master teacher of that tradition, and he will tell you more about what that's about. He studied social anthropology at Oxford University on a Rhodes Scholarship. I discovered in our conversation at dinner that his doctorate was on Hindu pilgrimage. So if that is a topic that's of interest to you, and I will tell you from that snippet of conversation, it is a very interesting topic, I encourage you to ask him about his travels and his academic pursuits in that area. But the reason that he's here tonight and that he's really known in the Jewish world is for revitalizing, really reviving this tradition of Musar teaching, of Jewish character development, which is a staple in parts of the yeshiva world to have Musar teaching as part of one's day in some, not all, yeshivot, Orthodox places of study. But really was largely unknown in the Jewish world beyond that. And it is not, Musar is not a discipline which I studied in rabbinical school. I imagine it's on offer now, it wasn't then. But in my own rabbinate, it really has been the right thing at the right time in terms of being a genre of study, being a type of study which not only speaks to the head, but which also speaks to the heart, and which also translates in very concrete ways into our actions. And I think for many of us who are spiritual seekers at this moment in time, we're looking for that kind of learning which doesn't only excite our intellects or speak to our emotions, but also somehow be translatable into how we live our lives, to give us wisdom, to draw on practices to reinforce us. And so with all of that together, it gives me great pleasure, and it is an honor and a privilege to introduce my teacher, many of our teachers, even if you know him only through his writings, Dr. Morinis. Thank you for being with us.
Shabbat Shalom. So it's a pleasure to be here with you and to share a bit of what has been a journey for me over the last 20 years. It was prior to those 20 years that I was a doctoral student at Oxford. That's something that, she didn't mention that she also was a Rhodes Scholar. You know, there are not that many of us who had that scholarship who are actively involved in the Jewish world. I think that was actually what first our antennae went up, and we found out that there was somebody else in the Jewish world who also shared that. But I did do my doctorate on Hindu pilgrimage, which is nothing I will talk about tonight. But you know, in those days I was learning Hindi and Sanskrit, and then certainly for the last 20 years, my work has been much more in Hebrew and Aramaic, and even to some extent Yiddish. And I grew up in a household where Yiddish was spoken. Both my parents were born in Europe. They came over as not such young children, but you know, preteens still, and they spoke Yiddish. And my grandparents also came over. They were actually the immigrant generation, and so the Yiddish was around. And they, of course, didn't teach it to me, but I have still an ear for Yiddish and an appreciation. I actually want to use that as a jumping off point to what I'm going to talk about, because I've noticed something about Yiddish that I want to share with you. It's such an expressive language. I heard a story that Abba Eban, who I think he was the president of Israel at one point, he was an academic, and he did not want to get involved in the freedom struggle against the British in the 1940s. But Yitzhak Shamir kept, a good Yiddish word, he kept nudging him. He kept nudging him to get involved, and he wouldn't. Nevertheless, the British arrested him, Abba Eban, and put him in prison. So Yitzhak Shamir smuggled a note into the prison, and on it was written, "Nu." And I don't know how anyone else can understand, but that was like a 5-page letter to say, "Nu." The whole thing was laid out in two letters, one syllable. As Rabbi Gershko mentioned, my area of involvement in the Musar world, which I'll talk a little bit more about, really does focus on a kind of spiritual self-development. There is an element of character development in order to fulfill these spiritual ideals that are set for us by the Jewish world. And one of the things about Yiddish is I don't think that, now I'm not an expert on all the languages of the world, but I can't imagine another language has come up with such precision in naming human character flaws as Yiddish has. Because when you start looking at the list of words that are familiar in Yiddish, familiar to people who don't speak any other Yiddish, but if you use, and just sticking to the ones that are acceptable to say in a synagogue, context, I have a short list to which you can add: Schnook, Schlepper, Schmendrick, Nudnik, Schmo, Schlemiel, Schlemazel. Now, you don't have to know any Yiddish. You just have to watch late-night television to have these words preserved in your vocabulary, because they have currency in the world among people for whom no Yiddish is at all part of their background. We come from a heritage in which there was a precision to be able to name the difference between the person who spilled the bowl of soup and the person he spilled it on. Because, of course, the one who spills the bowl of soup is a schlemiel. And who does he spill it on? Schlemazel, right? Schlemazel. So, you can say that in English, but not with the same laser-like precision that Yiddish masters. And I think what we see within that is that in the Jewish world there has been a very strong emphasis on character as a point of focus. And I want to point out that if you want to give someone, again using Yiddish, the highest praise you can give them, you might call them a mensch. To be a mensch is such an elevated level. Well, what does it mean? It means a person of good character. It doesn't mean you accomplished anything great. It doesn't mean you're wealthy. You can be very wealthy and not a mensch. You can be very successful and not a mensch. So to be a mensch is really a statement about character. And our sages through the centuries have affirmed that to be a good Jew means to have a good character. They note, though, something interesting, which is that the character traits, which are so important in the Jewish world, are not included among the 613 commandments of the Torah. And through the centuries, people have wondered about that, because it has been affirmed century after century that we are supposed to be good people. If you're a Jew, you take on a responsibility to be a good person. You're supposed to be a mensch. So they wonder, why aren't we commanded to be truthful or humble or compassionate or kind? Why aren't those part of the commandments? And Rabbi Chaim Vital, who was a Kabbalist of the 16th century in Tzfat, gave an answer which has kind of come down through all the subsequent teachers in different forms, which is that the reason they're not given in the Torah is because they're actually the foundation of the Torah. If you don't have those character traits, you can't actually get from the Torah what the Torah is trying to give you. That to be that kind of person is a person who is accessible to the learning from the Torah and the internalization of the Torah's message. The Vilna Gaon, who was a great scholar in the 18th century, he put it into a very beautiful image. He said that Torah is like water. It waters whatever seeds are in the ground. If you're a person of negative character and you study Torah, it's going to cause those weeds to blossom. And if you're a person of good character, it's going to cause beautiful flowers and sweet fruits to come up out of your study of Torah. I'll just give one other example from a more recent teacher who I've been studying recently, the Slonim Rebbe. Slonim is one of the schools of Hasidut, of Hasidism. And he says that the Torah does not command us to be good people, because he points out that in the Talmud it says, an amazing teaching, whoever does not have compassion, bashfulness, and mercy is not of the seed of Abraham. Whoever does not have compassion, bashfulness, and mercy is not of the seed of Abraham. So he points out there's no commandment to be Jewish. That's not one of the commandments. No one's commanded to be Jewish. To be Jewish, you have to have a good character. And the Torah is only applicable to people of good character. That was his understanding. In our generation, certainly the generation I grew up with, there's another reason why character did not show up so strongly in the exposure I had to the Jewish world. And it's a result of a much broader phenomenon, which is that in the latter half of the 20th century, the inner life of the individual was not on the Jewish agenda. The Jewish world was very busy with many things. It was building institutions, building schools, it was building synagogues. It was involved in the state of Israel. It was becoming affluent. It was becoming assimilated. It was becoming politically engaged. But the inner life, the tender inner life of each of us as a unique individual on our own life journey, that really did not have a place on the Jewish agenda. If you had questions about the inner life and all of the spiritual aspects, there was really no context for most people in the Jewish world for where to take that. And for that, you had to go to a psychologist or, as many people in my generation did, a Buddhist meditation center. And it wasn't a coincidence that I ended up going to India and studying Hindu pilgrimage. A lot of people my age, and I would say looking around our age, did go to the East for spirituality because it really wasn't what the Jewish world was about in those days. I've come to see that our generation, as a kind of description, is really a generation of spiritual orphans. We do not, very few of us, there are always an exception, but very few of us receive a direct transmission of the spiritual wisdom of the Jewish elders to our parents or our teachers or our rabbis. I know I certainly didn't, even though I had wonderful parents who taught me things, and many of them were inadvertently Jewish. In other words, to them it was common sense, but now I know where they got those ideas from. But those aspects of character that reflect the entire enterprise of cultivating an inner life. One of the more recent Mussar teachers describes or defines spirituality as building your interior world. The Jewish world I grew up with was not involved in building my interior world. It was more involved in building an exterior world. And as a result of that, many of us did not have any exposure to that tradition or any of the inner traditions of the Jewish world. As a result, I would venture, well, let me ask you as a question, how many people who grew up in the Jewish world who are here tonight heard the word Mussar growing up? Nobody? One tentative hand at the back. The Mussar tradition is only one of the Jewish traditions of the inner life, but it is a prominent one. And it was started in the 900s, which means that it's about an 1,100-year-old tradition. One of the books that I'm going to cite tomorrow was published in 1580. And since 1580, so that's almost 500 years ago, since 1580, that book has never been out of print. It should happen to my books. But that's an incredible depth of history and tradition to go back that far and to have a real tradition that can date itself back 1,100 years and be built up. It's not just that something happened 1,100 years ago that's remembered, It's that it's been an enterprise or a project going on for 1,100 years, and we didn't know about it. I certainly didn't. I first heard the word Musar and came in contact with this tradition when I was 47 years old. And so it is typical of our generation, and I would say, reflective of the fact that we should see ourselves as orphans. We should see ourselves as people who are orphaned from the continuity of spiritual traditions of previous generations. One of the things that is fundamental in that is how we see our inner life. We grow up in a generation which has been so dominated by psychology that we tend to see our inner lives in a secular light. We see ourselves as personalities, identities. We see our character traits as secular traits, just as matters of fact of social life, like honesty, generosity, gratitude, just fact. The Jewish view is very different for one reason, which relates to why I call ourselves not just orphans, but spiritual orphans. The Jewish world sees us as spiritual beings. Our fundamental nature, more fundamental than anything else, is that we are souls. Each of us is a soul. That's our fundamental nature. Less fundamental, more superficial, is the fact that you have an identity, that you have somebody you think of yourself as, the you that experiences things. Deeper than that is the person who came into this mysterious world through a birth process and will leave this world through a death process, and is much more fundamental and connected to the mystery of the universe than the identity. As I said, the focus in practicality in this work is on traits of character, but in Hebrew, the word for character traits, which is a phrase, is midot ha-nefesh. Midot ha-nefesh. And nefesh means soul. And midot means measure. The measures of the soul. And that includes all the kinds of characteristics that I was just rattling off lists of. Anger is a midah ha-nefesh. And generosity and envy and gratitude and humility and arrogance and all of the things that we experience in ourselves and other people. These are not just traits of character. These are traits of the soul. And the importance of that in terms of the Jewish world is that we are given one thing in the Torah, and I can't call it a commandment because most of the commentators who have combed through the Torah and who have created the list of commandments don't count it as a commandment. But it says in the Torah, in Leviticus, you shall be holy. That's actually the summation of the job description of a human being. That we are in this world to become holy. That might be an alien concept or something that doesn't sit into your ordinary way of thinking about your day-to-day life. Like, how'd you do today on your journey towards holiness, you know? And that comes to a great extent to how did you drive today? How did you go to the supermarket today? How did you treat the people who are close to you today? The pathway to holiness is the character. Is developing the inner life of spiritual qualities like generosity, gratitude, etc. And Rav Kook, who was the first Ashkenazi chief rabbi of Israel, he said, character development is the hallway and holiness is the parlor. Character development is the hallway, holiness is the parlor. And he also said the final purpose of life is to be holy. Now, the Musar teachers really zeroed in on practicality. I don't know if this is one of the things you like about the tradition. One of the things I love about the tradition is that it's very practical, and it's very much involved in every day. Sometimes when you think of things being spiritual, you think, oh well, I go about my everyday life, and then I carve out an hour of the day when I'll go to the temple and I'll have a spiritual experience. The Musar teachers don't let you get away with that. Everything you do in life is a spiritual experience. How you drive your car is a spiritual experience. how you are at the supermarket, how you are in the schoolroom, how you're in the classroom, how you are when you're playing your musical instrument, especially how you are when you treat other people. This is spiritual practice. Because in Judaism, unlike Hinduism or other religions, we don't have a tradition of monasteries and monks and nuns who leave the ordinary world and go out. Even our highest religious people live married lives in community. And so we don't have a tradition of separation from the ordinary world. Our spirituality is built into the ordinary world. And that brings me to what I really wanted to focus on with you today. That's the foundation for understanding the issue that I want to take as an example, but it's also a very practical issue, is the issue of the inner trait of kavod. And kavod translates into English as respect or honor. The Musar teachers consider this to be one of the primary traits of the inner life. And we live in a generation in which respect for other people, and I'm usually concerned with the way we speak to other people and the way we speak about other people. In my 70 years, I've never seen it be as bad as it is now. And that's why the title of this talk is about honor in toxic times. Look at the way people are speaking to each other and about each other today. Look at what is going on television, in politics, around the dinner table. Someone just mentioned at dinner, two branches of the family that, they just have different politics, and that means they can't talk to each other in a civil way. And it didn't used to be that way. These are especially toxic times, and beyond that, it is not in tune with Jewish values to treat other people with disrespect in that way. It always begins with speech, but it seldom ends with speech. It begins with anti-Semitic talk, and it ends with guns in the synagogue. It begins with anti-immigrant talk, and it ends with concentration camps. It begins with words, and it ends with blood. And you don't have to point to any particular example. This is not just about anti-Semitism. It's about what happens when people do not respect other people and consider them to be worthy of the kind of honor that the Jewish tradition says is central. We have a teaching in the Talmud that says somebody who embarrasses another person, it is as if they spilled their blood. And they use a phrase for that because they know that when a person gets embarrassed, they turn white, they blanch. And that's because you spilled their blood through embarrassing them. And in the Talmud, you find that they include embarrassing another person or demeaning another person in the same category as hitting them. Physical violence, and you have to pay financial compensation as if you had struck them because it's considered to be so important. The reality is none of us needs to be schooled in how to be judgmental and speak harshly about other people. I've noticed no one's running workshops on how to be judgmental. It's like there's not much of a market when you've got a nation of experts, right? That's like, we know how to do that. It's like, also, no one's running workshops on how to worry. No one's running workshops on how to be angry. There's no market for that. But we know that, and when we expose ourselves to the media and what's going on in the political arena, there is a trickle-down effect of the way the modeling is happening of how to treat other people. Where it comes down to is right into the family and around the dinner table, where people, because we live in an environment of disrespect, then we find that people are being disrespectful to the people who are closest to us. One of the techniques our tradition gives us to clarify an issue is to look at extreme cases. when we talk about respect of another person, remember, I'm coming from a place where I say this entire world is spiritual, and the whole reason to respect other people has to be about spiritual practice. The rabbis take an example of how we treat a dead body. That's an extreme case of how to treat a human being. If we have certain guidelines about how we treat a dead body, then make the inference, well, if that's true of a dead body, how should we treat a living person? And we find very consistently in Jewish tradition statements, laws, and requirements that we treat a dead body with respect. There's a law that if you're traveling, you have to imagine the time of the Talmud 2,000 years ago, you're traveling on some remote place and you come upon a dead body, your obligation is to bury that body on the spot. That's everybody's obligation. And it doesn't matter who that person is, and it doesn't even matter if they're Jewish. You have the obligation, whenever you find a dead body, to bury that person. The Kohen Gadol, the high priest, and all Kohanim, the rules are they're not supposed to have any exposure to the dead. A Kohen is not supposed to go into the cemetery. And there's very restricted contact. If the Kohen Gadol stumbles on a corpse, the Kohen Gadol should by himself bury that corpse on the spot. If the landowner objects to burying the person there, that landowner is overruled. Dying on that spot is equivalent to buying that land, according to Jewish law, and you bury the person there. Rabbi Akiva, who was one of the great sages of the Talmud, when he was young, he had that thing happen to him. He was wandering, he found a dead body, and in his ignorance, what he did in order to honor that dead body was he put the corpse on his shoulder and he carried it 4 kilometers to a Jewish cemetery to bury it there. And when he told his teachers that, he thought he was telling them proudly what he had done, a heroic deed, and they criticized him. They said every step he took was equivalent to shedding innocent blood. Because in honor of that body, it should have been buried right away. It was dishonoring the body to carry it like that. One more example, of 2 actually. One in the same kind. You're wandering along, you find a dead body. When is it? It's Purim. You're on your way to the synagogue. You're going to be hearing the Megillah reading. That's a mitzvah. It's a commandment to go and hear the Megillah being read. And you just come upon a dead body. Which takes precedence? You already know. I wouldn't have brought this story if it had the Megillah reading. That sort of shoots my whole theory. No, you have to bury the body. And if that means you don't get to hear the Megillah, well and good. Where this really comes to a point that is what I'd like as a kind of take-home for you, is a story the Talmud tells about 2 twins, 2 brothers. One is the king. It's an analogy or an allegory. One is the king, and one is a highwayman, a robber. And they're identical twins. So one is ruling the country, one's out there stealing from people on the highway. And the king orders that his brother be caught and punished. And they capture him and they hang him. And he immediately orders that as soon as his brother's hanged, he has to be taken down. Because he said, if people see this hanging corpse and they look at who it is, they're going to think the king has been hanged because the image of this individual was the same as the image of the king. And that is the essential reason why we are supposed to respect other people. Because we are also made in the image of the king. But not the king of the country, but the King of Kings. The Torah tells us we are made in the image and likeness of God. We just had that 2 weeks ago. It's not even a long-term review. In the story of the creation of Adam and Eve, the language of the Torah is, God made them in God's likeness. And we are made in God's likeness. So in the same way that the twin brother was in the likeness of the king, we are all in the likeness of the King of Kings. Now, what does that mean in reality? I have to invoke again the notion of being spiritual orphans, because very few of us have been schooled to walk through life, to walk down St. Catherine's, to walk through the mall, to go through the office and see image of God, image of God, image of God, image of God. But there are no exceptions. There are no exceptions. We are all, when, according to Jewish tradition, that's what makes a human being human, as opposed to just an animal. We are all made in the image of God. And that is the basis for honoring and respecting other people. When we disrespect another person, we're not only disrespecting them, we're disrespecting the image that they are conveying, that they are embodying. When we disrespect, when we speak negatively, when we speak toxically, and unthinkingly use such derogatory language about other people. And some of the people who are doing this to make a living, whether that's comedians or politicians, and both of them fall into that category, they are clearly not holding in mind this fundamental Jewish teaching, which is that the person they're talking about is made in the image of God. There's a story, again, from the Talmud about Rabbi Elazar, and he was riding along on his donkey, and he had just had a great day, and he's really feeling good. The Talmud tells us he's feeling good. And he comes upon a man, and the Talmud tells us he is an extremely ugly man. And from his fullness with himself, Rabbi Elazar says to him, "Tell me, empty one, is everyone in your town as ugly as you?" That's a pretty shocking thing. But the man gets it right back, because he says, "I do not know, but go to the craftsman who made me and say to that one, how ugly is the vessel you have made?" When I made my notes, I put craftsman with a capital C. So that I would be really clear who we're talking about here, who made this person. You know, okay, accept the description. At some level, at the very superficial level, there may have been something physically unattractive about this person. But where are your eyes focused? Are you looking at the physical, or are you looking deeper at the image and likeness of God that is standing right in front of you at this moment? When we are disrespectful to other people, we hurt them, we hurt the relationship. Each relationship is part of a web that makes up a community, or a society, or a nation, and we hurt ourselves. If you accept the Torah's teaching that we are on a journey to holiness, can you imagine that the same person who speaks in terribly derogatory terms of other people can at the same time be called holy? Is that possible? These are mutually contradictory, mutually exclusive terms. When you, and I'll include you to some extent just in case you identify with this teaching, when you speak in derogatory terms, disrespectfully, which doesn't mean you have to agree with everyone, it doesn't mean you have to be nicey-nicey. It just means, as I said to my granddaughter this morning, you can ask for the banana to be taken out of the cereal without yelling at your mother. And that becomes an analogy for the way we can disagree with one another. We should disagree with one another, but never putting the other person out of our heart. Never disregarding the fact that that person in front of me is made in the image and likeness of God. And if I do, I am hurting myself. I am impeding my own spiritual journey as much as I am hurting them and hurting society. The passion I feel for this is passion for Jewish values. I'm not making up this sort of contemporary talk about kavod, honor. We've been talking about this since the Talmudic times and before. So 2,000 years we have been emphasizing the importance of recognizing the image and likeness of God in every human being and treating them like that. We happen to live in a generation where that's not popular. We have to be people who stick to our tradition, because that's been the key to the survival of the Jewish people. We have remained who we are. In a world in which people are uncompassionate, we have to have resolve to be compassionate, as unpopular as that may be. If it's a cruel world, we have to be merciful. If it's an ungrateful world, we have to be grateful. Not because it's an ungrateful world, but in spite of the world, because these are our values. These are our long-term values. I liken this is our Jewish mutual fund. When I speak to my financial advisor, the market's up and the market's down, he always tells me, don't worry, you have a long-term plan. The long-term plan of the Jewish people is to invest in honoring each other, respecting each other, being generous, kind, compassionate, and gracious. And so that is being true to our tradition. That is being a Jew. That is being of the seed of Abraham. We have propagated these values for millennia. And in these toxic times, we need to emphasize our own commitment to being the kind of people that we have the potential to be. And the Torah says that we have an obligation to be. Shabbat Shalom.